All right, Psych 1. Let's talk about dissociative disorders. What is dissociation? Feels like you're separating the mind from the body, okay? Um, or in a more academic way, personality components or mental processes from conscious thought, okay? This can be normal. You can feel sort of like you're having just a little bit of distance between mind and body. It's not common, but even if you're lightheaded, it can feel that way. In like a concussion kind of way. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it can. Again, this has to be to the extent where it would get in the way of someone's ability to operate a quote unquote normal day to day life. Okay, dissociative amnesia. All right, if there's a traumatic event. By the way, let's back up a little bit. You can probably figure out if you're looking at this what amnesia means. We've touched on it briefly before. It's a loss of memory. Okay, either an inability to recall old memories or an inability to create new ones. Okay, in this instance, there's nothing that a doctor could point um, to say, like in a brain scan that indicates medically or physiologically is probably a better way of putting it, that a part of the brain has been affected, and that is why, like physical brain trauma, and that is why someone's having a problem with their memory. If someone's experiencing dissociative amnesia, that's not going to be what happens. If you've had a head injury of some kind, and hopefully you haven't, but if you have, or if you know someone that has, doctors are going to be able to go in and do a brain scan and say, there's been a little bit of trauma, at least, or more, to certain parts of the brain that deal with memory. Okay, that won't happen in this instance. This is going to be following a traumatic event, just the trauma itself um, causing the memory loss. Okay, and that can be. Some of you might be thinking, well, okay, yeah, something really traumatic. You could block some of that out because it was so traumatic, or the sympathetic system was so active, and there was so much of a certain chemical going throughout your body. What chemical? Yes, cortisol. That, yeah, you're going to forget parts of the actual trauma. Okay, well, yes, that may be, but unfortunately, with dissociative amnesia, you can also lose chunks of memory from before the traumatic event, and experience an inability to create new memories after the traumatic event. And the head scratcher about all of it is that, again, a medical doctor is not going to be able to go in and make a scan, or do a scan and make an assessment that says, well, your hippocampus has been damaged, for example. Okay, dissociative fugue. Of all of these, of every one of these, this is probably the one that sounds the most made up, or the hardest to believe. I don't want to say made up. I guess I already did, but let me change the way that I worded that. It's the hardest to believe because it just doesn't sound real. Um, it is characterized by forgetting personal information as well as a sudden relocation geographically from home and work, and taking on a brand new identity. Okay, this is not really multiple personality disorder. Well, it's not multiple personality disorder, which is dissociative identity disorder. But dissociative fugue happens typically following a traumatic event, where someone, they might live for 20 years and have something really bad happen to them. And one day they wake up. They live 20 years as someone named Jennifer, and something at age 20 happens. It's so traumatic that they wake up across the country and start introducing themselves as, uh, you know, Josephine or something similar, but not Jennifer. They've moved to a different place. They are taking on a new identity because whatever it was that happened to Jennifer was just too much. And so they are starting over. This is not something people choose to do. The brain takes over. It's a defense mechanism. Is it as dramatic as that every time? No, it's not. But a lot of times the extreme examples are the ones that stick. So that's why I'm using this one. This one's very rare. This disorder is very rare. Um, but what's the rest of the story? Well, okay, so Josephine picks up this new life across the country from her previous location as Jennifer, and she lives for so long, and eventually, for the as I understand it, most of the time, one day she might wake up and think, well, where am I? Why are people calling me Josephine? I thought I lived in San Diego. Why am I in New York? Kind of thing. So it's an ABA kind of situation where Jennifer, 20 years, Josephine, X number of years, and then Jennifer returns. Um, it's, again, like I said, it doesn't sound like it could be real. It is. And it's not always that length of time. It's not years and years and years, but it can be. Um, that's the primary difference between dissociative identity disorder and which we're going to get into now, and dissociative fugue. Dissociative identity disorder is what used to be called multiple personality disorder. Okay, just the existence of two or more personalities within a single individual. I've read stories about an individual who had 4 or 5 dozen personalities within their one physical being. Some of them, the person, if you looked at their actual birth certificate, it might be, let's say they're a 25-year-old male. Well, some of the identities that come to the surface could be other genders, other age, different characteristics. One that I find really interesting is handedness. So, if you write with your right hand, you might, and you experience dissociative identity disorder, there might be personalities that or identities that surface that are not right-handed but left-handed. You find a pencil or a pen right now and go find a piece of paper, a scratch paper, and try to write your name on it with the opposite hand. It's not going to look very good because that's not how you are wired. And yeah, these identities show up in the same body, all X number of them, but they are, that's one example of how they can be entirely different. And there's a lot of practical questions that go along with this disorder and the prior dissociative fugue. For this one, if it's a person who's born a certain gender and has those reproductive organs, but one identity identifies as a different gender, I've had people ask, well, how does that work? Because obviously the body doesn't just change while that identity is in control of the body. And I don't have a great answer for that. It could be something like, in some situations, it could be that these identities don't necessarily surface and stay for a long time. And so that could be one reason. There probably are other more dynamic, medically researched reasons than that. Going back to dissociative fugue, very practical questions come up like, how did Jennifer get from San Diego to New York? What about her driver's license? What about, needing to show ID when she bought or leased an apartment? I can't answer all of those, and some people are in a situation that they are so emotionally fraught that they can just sort of wiggle their way out of that conversation or gloss over it and just to get what they think they need in the moment, like an apartment or being able to use a debit card that doesn't say Jennifer, but it says Josephine. Okay. So yeah, I know it doesn't sound real. And the reason you don't think it sounds real is because it's rare. It's not common in the least. And so, but it's also the kind of thing that if it exists within someone that it absolutely would be one that would derail the quote unquote normal day-to-day life. Okay, let's go with One more, I think. Yeah, one more here. Depersonalization. This is the one that's really a detachment. Like I said, an out of body experience. This is people can experience depersonalization not as a disorder, um, but in really traumatic situations. And I'm not going to get real specific here because none of this is happy. But if someone is being physically, personally victimized in a violent way, it this is it's not a defense mechanism in terms of like the defense mechanisms that you'll learn in Psych 2 or in AP or in a year long or a psych class or a gen psych a semester long class in college, because there's a number of those that people exhibit like all the time. But it's used as a mechanism of defense for someone to not have to be present while they are being physically violated in some way, some violent way. Okay, that, and I'm not saying that that depersonalization is common. Um, and if you've experienced it for other reasons, again, being lightheaded, I'm not saying is totally detaching your mind from your body in a way that it's like you're watching yourself on surveillance, but you can feel so lightheaded that you don't feel physically present, excuse me. Some have called that a low level of depersonalization. There's a range of severity, and if someone experiences something so traumatic that they depersonalize frequently, and probably not to any preference of their own, they don't choose to after experiencing something traumatic, then it gets to the point where, if you're in a business meeting and all of a sudden you feel like your mind is leaving your body, you're probably not going to function at the same level that you normally would. Again, I'm going back to that key bit of information in the description or the definition of psychological disorders. That's the kind of thing that's going to get in the way of someone's day-to-day life, that's going to cause emotional discomfort. Okay, and if it happens repeatedly, yeah, that's going to check some boxes in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Next up is going to be somatoform disorders, which we will get to next.